Hey guys, welcome to Funky's World. Okay, today we are making spaghetti sauce as soon as the meatballs arrive. Which will be a food haul. This video is one of my videos that I do about my favorite things. I grew up primarily with country music, although it wasn't the thing. That's why the Barbara Mandrell song, I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool, resonates with me. And because I was country when country wasn't cool. And seeing the Opry at 100 made me reflect on the music I grew up on. I grew up on the Opry, you know. My mother shared it with me. What the heck? Gosh, I hope my neighbors aren't moving. As I was saying, before the noise interrupted me, I grew up on country music, as did my mom. My dad liked it, but my dad grew up on oldies rock and roll, 50s and 60s. Well, he was an adult in the 60s. That's hard to imagine. But, 50s rock and roll. And his favorites were Gene Pitney, Roy Orbison, In fact, Gene Pitney actually attended school with my father's cousins. In Connecticut, which is kind of neat, and I'm so glad I have to tell my dad that. I'm like, your favorite singer went to school with your cousin. How crazy is that? Cousins we didn't even know existed. And um, so that was pretty cool. They're both passed on now, but as is Gene. But it was pretty neat, to have that family connection. So I so I grew up enjoying that music as well. But because I'm my mother's daughter, I primarily grew up on country music because she was the primary caregiver. So what she listened to was what I learned to listen to. That being said, my mother listened to a little bit of rock and roll. Her favorites were Meatloaf, Pat Benatar, Linda Ronstadt, Laura Branigan. Because they sang about stuff that she liked, and she liked their voices, and those three women were, you know, if she was going to listen to rock, that's basically what she was going to listen to. And of course, she listened to 70s rock that she went to high school and college to. The Bee Gees, excuse me, Cher, um, the Eagles. What else? Fleetwood Mac, REO Speedwagon, the 70s stuff. Because my parents were 10 years apart in age. So my mother graduated from high school in 1972. My father would have graduated in 62 had he graduated. And so it's a little bit different in terms of what they grew up with. My mother also grew up with the Opry because the grandparents had a battery operated radio, and that's what they would listen to. Way up in the sticks of Maine. The grandparents didn't have power. So the radio would be on Saturday nights for the Opry, and that was pretty much it, so that they could save battery power. And so my mother grew up on that, as well as her own era of music. So no. So she made sure that I grew up on the Opry and on the music that she loved. And I'll never forget, one of her favorites and one of my favorites is Donna Fargo. For those of you who don't know, Donna Fargo was big in mm, the mid 70s to the very early 80s. She was a brilliant songwriter, singer, one of the early female songwriters, um, hit maker. But unfortunately, around the time that her variety show started in 1981, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and couldn't tour anymore. She still did music, but she couldn't tour to promote it or anything. So, unfortunately, it kind of ended things. I mean, she was on a couple of television programs after that. One was about all the women of country music. She was on it. I remember seeing that. And she was one of my favorites. She was one of my mother's favorites. Of course, my mother loved Tammy Wynette, Loretta Lynn. I think Loretta Lynn was one of her absolute favorites. You know, Tammy Wynette. But you can't be, just like you can't be a man who loves country music and not love Hank Williams and George Jones. And not have them have some kind of influence on you as a country musician or as a country fan. You can't be a woman in country music or a female fan of country music without Loretta Lynn and Tammy Wynette, Dolly Parton. And I grew up with them. One of my mother's absolute favorites was Tanya Tucker. The very first song I learned all the way through was Tanya Tucker's What's Your Mama's Name? I do not want to get, well, I can't get demonetized, but I don't want to get in trouble, copyright struck, for singing it, but what's your mama's name, child? What's your mama's name? Does she ever talk about a place called New Orleans? Has she ever mentioned a man named Buford Wilson? That's the chorus. And it starts out 30 some odd years ago. A young man came to Memphis asking about a rose that used to blossom in his world. No one took the time to mind the young man's questions until they heard him ask a little green-eyed girl. And then she goes into the chorus. Then you do the second verse. There's no chorus between the second and third verse. Second verse is 20 some odd years ago, a young man lost a life in labor to county jail just because he asked a little green-eyed girl a question and offered her a nickel's worth of candy if she'd tell. And then it goes right into the third verse. A year and some odd days ago, an old man died in Memphis, another wayward soul the county'd have to claim. Inside the old man's ragged coat, they found a faded letter. It said, "You have a daughter, and her eyes are Wilson green." And then she goes back into the chorus. Everybody liked to hear me do it, even though my singing's not the greatest. But everybody was impressed that I knew the entire song, and everybody would listen to me sing it. And I felt good, you know. I knew the entire song, and I still do, as I just quoted it to you. I believe that song was on Delta Dawn. And so was the song that I'm sure caused controversy at the time called why did the name just escape me? No Man's Land, which was actually a story about a young Southern girl that a man assaulted in an intimate manner. And the story of her life and how she became a nurse. And 6 men pretended they'd had heart attacks the first year that she nursed. She was absolutely gorgeous, but she wouldn't go near a man since she had been abused. And finally, the man who had abused her was rotting in jail, became very sick, and I guess unknowingly they brought her in to treat him. She refused to treat him, and he died. So it had to have caused controversy, especially the age she was when she sang it, being a teenager. I think the message was important, though. Um, but my mother loved her. Um, when I was little, we used to go to shows at a local place called the Indian Ranch. And it's an outside venue on a lake. And we used to go to shows, country shows. I don't remember them well, but I have one distinct memory, and I was telling my mother about this. Remember when we saw Donna Fargo? She was singing Superman, and I was kind of dancing along. I was little, and I knocked over my soda. I kicked it over. She was trying not to laugh because she could see my little face, and and she knew I was having a lot of fun, which always makes them feel good. And I just remember her smile and her looking at me, and I'll never forget that. And a memory my mother never forgot her whole life was when I was a baby, and she and I met um, oh no, I can't remember her name. It wasn't God who made honky angels. What the flip? Why can't I? Her name. That was the very first #1 hit for a female in country music, by the way. And she was performing at a theme park. And we were there, and it was raining, and my mother was looking for a place to get me out of the rain. If I had to guess, my father was either drinking or playing miniature golf. Because my father used to play miniature golf whenever we went uh, to the theme parks. That was one of the things that him and his brother enjoyed doing. And at that time, he drank, so he would have either been drinking or playing miniature golf, or maybe both. And because even when he didn't drink, he played miniature golf. That was one of his brother and him would go off and play around in miniature golf and leave my mother with all the kids. And so I don't even know where the miniature golf course was at um, Whalen Park, but I know, and this wasn't at Whalen Park. I think this was up at Canopy in New Hampshire, and it happened to start pouring. My mother was just looking for a place to get her baby out of the rain, so she stepped into a tent. She didn't know that she was stepping into a top country star's tent, And then she walked up to her. She's like, I'm sorry. I said, no, come on over here. Sit down. She said she fell in love with me. I was just a baby. I need to tell you who it was because it's driving me crazy that I can't remember her name. Anyway. Okay. It wasn't God who made honky tonk angels. Kitty Wells. Good grief. Shoot. Excuse me. She didn't know she was stepping into Kitty Wells then. She said, she walked up to us. I was holding you. And I was like, sorry, I'll leave. She said, no, you come over here and sit right down. And she said, she talked to me. She was the sweetest woman ever. She said, she adored you. She held you. I'm like, wait, Kitty Wells held me when I was a baby. You know? That's just a crazy thing to have, you know? And my mother remembered meeting Conway Twitty at Indian Ranch and Loretta Lynn and Ferlin Husky. And she said one thing that she took away from all those meetings was the humbleness of those country stars. And it's one of the reasons she loved them so much, because she had met them and they were so humble and kind. And so yeah, it's an honor, you know, to have grown up with that music. And years later, I wrote a letter to Bill Anderson. He was hosting the Opry show at the time, the Opry show on TV on Saturday nights. And I'd been listening to his music since the 70s when I was really little, and absolutely loved him. And so did my mom, and she had passed it on to me. And I wrote him a letter telling him that. He sent me back a letter and an autographed picture, and I still have it, thanking me. He also sent me a form because I told him, I said, your music's so hard to find. And he actually sent me an order form to be able to find his music. And I believe that my mother did order a couple of tapes from it because it was so hard to find. She was thrilled to get it. I mean, she was thrilled that we got the autographed picture and, you know, a really nice letter back from him. But yeah. So when you step into a tent in the rain, and it turns out to be the tent of the first woman to ever have a #1 hit in country music, you step back and you go, what have I done? But she was the sweetest little lady. And Bill Monroe was there with her, and for some reason my mother thought that was her husband. It wasn't her husband. Um, and my mother introduced me to so many of the great women. Jeannie Seeley, um, Jean Shepherd, you know, women that she knew from listening to the Opry. Um, Another one of her favorites was Lynn Anderson, her mother Liz Anderson. You know, and as I grew up, you know, and she introduced me to the Oak Ridge Boys, of course, Statler Brothers. And that's where I got the connection between gospel and country. And I am proud to say that the newest member of the Grand Ole Opry is Grammy Award winning, Dove Award winning gospel music legend, well, contemporary Christian music legend, Stephen Curtis Chapman. And he was there to perform and bridge country and gospel, because country and gospel were like this. And I remember my mother explaining to me about how the origins of country music came through gospel, and many of the great country singers were singers in their churches. And how one of the things in country music back in the day, and you'll see it on all the old albums, is at least one Christian-based song on an album. Usually there was one on each side of the album, but there was always at least one Christian-based song on every album back in those days. And you had to be a devout Christian to be a member of the Grand Ole Opry. And a person of good standing, you know. And that's why Hank Williams got kicked out, because he was not of good standing. And so, and that's why T. Graham Brown took as many years as he did. Um, so, and now the Grand Ole Opry is 100 years old. My mother would have loved that show. And it kind of made me sad watching it. I watched it on YouTube in parts and pieces. Um, my mother would have loved it. You know, Opry Turns 100. It tributes to all of her favorites, and um, um, so yeah, she would have loved it. And Carrie Underwood had the entire audience in tears. She walked down the steps to walk to Randy toward the end of Forever and Ever Amen, because she did Three Wooden Crosses and Forever and Ever Amen, and nailed it, of course. And he had the biggest smile on his face. He can't sing anymore after his stroke. He's lucky to be alive, and he has a wonderful wife that takes such good care of him. And They used AI to meld his voice with another singer, and that singer's so honored to get to bring his music back to life. And he just, Randy Travis thought it was the neatest thing. And anyway, she walked down the steps, and Clint Black got up and took her hand and helped her because in high heels and a big old dress, it's hard to get down the steps. And everybody's like, that's Garth Brooks. Well, a couple of people. And I went over to say, that's Clint Black. But when I clicked on the replies to that comment, everybody said, that's Clint Black. Well, a couple of people said, no, Clint Black's tiny. Garth Brooks is bigger. Yeah, that was Clint Black. I helped her down the steps. She walked up to Randy. And the very last amen, she put the microphone up to him, and he said it. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. All the stars were crying. It was very emotional. So he got to sing the last amen. One of the other heartbreaking moments was when Alan Jackson performed, because you knew he wasn't doing well. He did Chattahoochee. And you can tell that his illness has taken a toll on him, because he actually flubbed up a line. And I'm not criticizing him. I'm supporting him. I'm saying, look, he's sick. You're lucky he was there, and you could just tell physically he wasn't well. You could just tell that his body was not handling being on stage like it used to. And it was sad. But you knew he wanted to do it. And a lot of people were saying that Keith Urban is rock and roll, he's not country. And I disagree, but does he like faster songs? Yeah. Can he sing just about anything? Yep. But I do believe his heart is in country music. I was watching him at the event. They would show him singing along to classic country songs, this huge smile on his face, just so happy to be there, to be a part of it. You could just feel that radiating from him. He loves country music. There's no question in my mind about that. And Dierks Bentley was just playing amazing. He started off with some Charlie Daniels. I saw him doing something else too on another tribute style show that he just nailed. And I think he did Chattahoochee, actually, and he nailed it. So, I know this has been a long one, but it's one I've enjoyed. And I gotta figure out where my food is. And we can make our spaghetti sauce. Thank you so much for joining me. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy birthday to the Grand Ole Opry. And here's to 100 more. Please subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye, guys.